Story 1. The Rest Stop That Eats Time. The clock on my dashboard read 3:47 a.m. when I pulled into the rest stop, and it read 3:47 a.m. when I tried to leave 6 hours later, and it's still reading 3:47 a.m. now, 3 days into what I can only describe as temporal imprisonment. And I'm watching myself arrive over and over through the rest stop windows. An endless loop of Jacob Reyes pulling his Peterbilt into parking spot number 7, and I can't make me stop. Can't warn myself not to park here. Can't break the cycle that's trapped me in this Nebraska rest stop where time doesn't pass and I'm slowly starving while the clock insists only seconds have elapsed. I'd been hauling electronics from Omaha to Salt Lake City, February 9th, 2024, a route I'd driven 40 times before. The rest stop was familiar. One of those standard Nebraska facilities on I-80 West. Brick building, vending machines, picnic tables. Nothing remarkable except I desperately needed coffee and a bathroom after 7 hours of driving through winter darkness. I parked, noted the time out of habit, planning a 15-minute break maximum. The lot was empty except for one other truck, a Freightliner with no company markings, cab dark, no signs of the driver. The building was colder inside than outside. Not naturally cold, but wrong cold, the kind that settles in your bones instantly. And the fluorescent lights flickered in patterns that seemed almost rhythmic, almost purposeful. The bathroom was empty, sterile, and when I washed my hands, the water from the faucet ran upward for just a moment before gravity reasserted itself. I stared at the faucet, told myself I'd imagined it, splashed my face with water that felt too thick, too viscous, and when I looked in the mirror, my reflection blinked 3 seconds after I did. I left the bathroom fast, decided to skip the coffee, headed for my truck. That's when I saw through the front windows. My truck, in parking spot 7. And I was just pulling in, watching myself park, watching myself climb down from the cab stretch, walk toward the building. Toward me. I was walking toward myself and I panicked, ducked behind a vending machine, watched myself, the arriving version, the past version from 15 minutes ago, enter the building and head to the bathroom. I ran outside, checked the parking lot. My truck was there, exactly where I'd left it, but also arriving, the past version pulling in, parking, and I could see myself in the cab going through the motions of shutting down, preparing to exit. The clock on the building's exterior display read 3:47 a.m. My watch read 4:02 a.m., 15 minutes of elapsed time, but the building's clock hadn't moved, and I was experiencing both moments simultaneously, was present in 2 time frames, and the building was somehow holding both, overlapping them, creating a loop. I tried to leave, got in my truck, started the engine, but when I drove toward the exit, the road curved back to the entrance, and I found myself pulling into parking spot 7 again, repeating the arrival. And through the windshield I could see myself inside the building, watching myself arrive. An infinite regression of Jacob Reyes discovering the same horror over and over. The other truck's driver emerged from the shadows. An old man, 70 or 80, wearing clothes from the 1970s, and he walked with the stiff gait of someone who'd been sitting too long. He approached my window, and I rolled it down, and he said in a voice like dry paper, "How long you been here?" 15 minutes, maybe 20. But I keep arriving, keep parking, can't leave. I've been here since March 3rd, 1977, pulled in for a rest break, never left. I've watched myself arrive 47,000 times. That's how many times the loop is reset. I count them. He showed me a notebook filled with tally marks, thousands of them obsessively recorded. The rest stop doesn't exist in normal time. It's a pocket, a bubble, and it traps temporal echoes. You're not repeating, you're seeing all versions of your arrival at once, all possible moments you exist here, and the building is collecting them, storing them. Why? What's doing this? The rest stop itself, or something under it. Doesn't matter. What matters is the loop tightens. Right now you're experiencing two time frames, your arrival and your present. Soon you'll experience 3, 4, dozens. You'll be aware of every moment you've spent here simultaneously, all overlapping, and your mind will fracture trying to process it. I got out of the truck, tried to walk away from the rest stop into the prairie, but the land looped too. I'd walk 100 yards and find myself back at the parking lot, arriving at the loop from different angles, but always returning. The building was the center of something, a gravitational anomaly in time, and everything within its radius was trapped in recursive cycles. Back inside the building, I found others. Not physically present, but temporally present. Translucent figures experiencing their own loops. A woman in 1980s business attire walking from bathroom to exit to bathroom to exit. Thousands of iterations overlapping. A family from the 1990s, parents and 2 children frozen in the moment of entering, repeating the door-opening motion infinitely. And more. Dozens more, all trapped in their own cycles, and I realized the rest stop had been collecting people for decades, storing their temporal echoes, and we were all here simultaneously, all experiencing our loops in the same impossible space. The old man explained while I watched myself arrive for what he said was the 19th time. You have to anchor yourself. Pick one moment, one version of yourself, and hold it. Don't let your consciousness drift between time frames. If you spread too thin, experiencing too many moments at once, you'll dissolve into the loop, become just another echo, and you'll lose the ability to think, to know you're trapped. I tried. Focused on the present, on the version of me standing in the building watching arrivals. But it was hard because I was also in my truck, also in the bathroom, also walking through the parking lot, my consciousness fragmenting across multiple simultaneous moments, and I felt myself splitting, my sense of identity dividing among the versions. Time, real-time, biological time was passing. My body was aging, was getting hungry, getting tired, even though the clock said 3:47 a.m. permanently. I ate from my truck's food stash, watched myself arrive the 33rd time, the 48th time, the 72nd time, each iteration eroding my sanity slightly, making it harder to remember which version was primary, which was echo. I tried to break the building, found an emergency axe, smashed windows, but the glass reformed instantly, the damage rewinding, and I realized the building existed in a state of temporal stasis where change couldn't persist, where everything reverted to 3:47 a.m. configuration regardless of what I did. The old man was fading. I could see through him now, his temporal anchor weakening, and he said with resignation, "I'm spreading. I've been here so long I exist in too many moments. I can feel myself in 1977, 1978, every moment until now. All active, all conscious, and I can't hold them together anymore. I'm dissolving into my own timeline. You'll do the same eventually. We all do." I watched him fade completely, becoming another translucent echo, his expression frozen in permanent exhaustion, and I wondered how long I had before the same happened to me, before I spread too thin across my accumulated loops and lost cohesion. Days passed, or didn't pass. My watch continued ticking, 4 days, 5 days a week, but the rest stop remained locked at 3:47 a.m., and I remained locked in the rest stop, and I was arriving constantly now, hundreds of versions pulling into spot 7, and I experienced flashes from all of them, moments where I was simultaneously present in multiple time frames, seeing the parking lot from dozens of angles, feeling multiple bodies, thinking multiple thought streams. I tried to document it, wrote in my logbook trying to maintain sanity through record keeping, but the entries became confused, mixed time frame observations, notes from versions of me that hadn't happened yet or had happened hours ago. And I couldn't maintain linear narrative because I wasn't experiencing linear time. The loop was tightening. I'd been here 2 weeks by my watch when I started seeing my own future. Saw myself 3 days ahead, gaunt, desperate, trying to smash through the walls with a tire iron. Saw myself a month ahead, barely moving, conserved energy lying in the building's corner. Saw myself 6 months ahead, translucent like the old man, fading into temporal echo, and the worst part was that those future versions could see me, could see their past self, and they were trying to warn me, trying to communicate, but their voices were distorted by temporal interference, and I couldn't understand them. I met a woman, another driver, Helen Kowalski, who'd arrived in her own loop 3 years ago by her count. She'd figured out how to maintain lucidity longer than most, had developed techniques for anchoring consciousness, and she taught me. You have to accept the loop. Stop fighting it. Let yourself experience the arrivals, acknowledge them, but don't identify with them. You're not your arrival. You're the continuity between arrivals. Hold on to that continuity. It helped. Slightly. I could feel myself in 17 simultaneous time frames now, but I maintained a sense of primary self, a version that was more real than the echoes, and I clung to it desperately. Helen and I tried to find the source, explored the building thoroughly, found a maintenance door that led down into subterranean levels that shouldn't exist, and we descended into concrete corridors that curved wrong, that existed in more dimensions than 3, and at the bottom we found it. Not a device, not a machine, but a wound. A tear in space-time, raw and pulsing, and the rest stop had been built over it, or had grown around it, and the wound was bleeding temporal energy, creating the loops, the traps, the pocket of recursive time. We couldn't fix it, couldn't close it. We could only watch it pulse, watch it generate temporal echoes, and understand that we were caught in its field permanently. That the wound had existed for decades and would exist for decades more, collecting travelers, storing their time loops, building a library of trapped moments. I've been here 5 months now, by my watch. By the building's clock, I've been here 0 minutes. I've arrived 8,347 times. I count them like the old man did, maintaining sanity through enumeration, and I'm spreading. Feeling myself exist in multiple moments with increasing vividness, my consciousness distributing across my accumulated time frames, and I know I'm fading. No, I'm becoming an echo. Helen faded last week, spread too thin, became translucent, became a ghost of herself, her primary anchor dissolving, and now she's part of the building's collection, another temporal echo replaying her arrival, and I watched her go and knew I'd follow soon. I see new drivers arrive sometimes, see them pull into the lot, park, walk into the building, and I try to warn them, try to scream, but I'm partially phased out now, partially echo. And they can't hear me clearly, can't see me fully, and they discover the loop on their own, go through the same panic, the same denial, the same eventual acceptance. The rest stop is growing. I can feel it, its temporal radius is expanding, the wound bleeding more energy, and soon it'll reach the highway. We'll trap passing vehicles, we'll collect thousands of loops instead of dozens, and I-80 will have a permanent dead zone where time doesn't pass and drivers arrive eternally. And no one outside will notice, because from outside it'll just look like a rest stop where vehicles sometimes disappear, where travelers vanish, and authorities will investigate and find nothing because the building exists slightly offset from normal time, slightly hidden, collecting its loops in pocket space. I'm in 942 simultaneous moments now. I can feel all of them, all my arrivals, all my attempts to escape, all my documentation efforts, all my conversations with Helen and the old man and the dozens of others trapped here, and I'm losing the ability to distinguish which moment is primary, which is echo, whether I'm writing this now or remembering writing this or anticipating writing this or experiencing all 3 simultaneously. The clock reads 3:47 a.m. My watch reads 5 months, 7 days, 4 hours. I'm arriving in spot 7 for the 11,000th time. I'm also fading into translucence. I'm also trying to break the windows. I'm also teaching a new driver about anchoring. I'm also screaming. I'm also silent. I'm also writing this. I'm also reading this years from now. I'm also arriving for the first time, pulling into spot 7, noting the time, planning a 15-minute break. And somewhere in the future I can sense but not prevent, Jacob Reyes is dissolving completely, spreading across every moment he spent in the rest stop, becoming pure temporal echo. Becoming part of the building's architecture, his consciousness distributed so thoroughly across his time frames that there's no primary self anymore, just thousands of ghost Jacobs experiencing thousands of ghost moments, forever arriving at 3:47 a.m., forever trapped, forever counting iterations that never advance, forever present in the rest stop that eats time and never gives it back. Story 2. The Mirror Truck. I first noticed the truck behind me was identical to mine at mile marker 412 on Highway 50 through Nevada, May 18th, 2023, 1:37 a.m. Same make and model Freightliner, same year, same color scheme, same company logo. Daniel's Freight in the exact same font and position on the trailer. And it was maintaining perfect distance, exactly 100 feet back. And when I accelerated, it accelerated. When I slowed, it slowed, matching my speed to the decimal, and I could see through my mirrors that the driver looked like me. Same build, same posture, same way of holding the steering wheel, and I felt my throat close with the realization that I was being followed by myself, by a perfect replica, and it had been there for miles, maybe hours, and I hadn't noticed until now. My name is Andrea Wolf. I'd been driving for Daniel's Freight for 9 years, hauling agricultural equipment from California to Colorado, a lonely route through empty Nevada desert, and I'd gotten used to isolation, to long hours with no other traffic, but this was different, this was wrong, and I grabbed my CB radio, tried to make contact. This is the Daniel's Freight Freightliner on Highway 50 East. Can the truck behind me identify yourself? Static. I tried again. Nothing. The truck maintained its position 100 feet back, mirroring every movement, and through the mirrors I could see the driver, me, speaking into a CB handset, lips moving in perfect synchronization with mine. I tried to outrun it, pushed my truck to 85 miles per hour, engine roaring, trailer swaying, and the mirror truck matched instantly. No acceleration period, just immediate speed adjustment, maintaining exact distance, and I watched my reflection, my doppelganger, sit calmly in the cab, hands steady on the wheel, no sign of strain or effort, driving with inhuman precision. I slammed the brakes, hard, from 85 to 30 in seconds that should have jackknifed my trailer, should have left the mirror truck unable to stop in time, should have caused a collision, but the mirror truck stopped perfectly, instantly, maintaining 100-foot distance, and I realized it wasn't following me, wasn't reacting to me. It was synchronized with me, was existing in perfect parallel, anticipating or knowing my actions before I performed them. I pulled over. The mirror truck pulled over behind me, same timing, same smooth deceleration. I sat in my cab, heart hammering, and watched through the mirrors as the doppelganger, as Mirror Andrea sat in her cab. Heart presumably hammering identically, watching me through her mirrors. And we were locked in mutual observation, two identical trucks, two identical drivers separated by 100 feet, and whatever impossible physics had created this duplication. I got out, slowly. The Mirror Andrea got out simultaneously. Same movements, same hesitation, and we stood by our respective vehicles staring at each other across the empty highway. And she was perfect, every detail correct. My face, my body, my clothing, even the small coffee stain on my jacket that I'd gotten that morning was replicated exactly on hers. And when I raised my hand, she raised hers, not like a mirror image that would have been reversed, but like a perfect copy, same side, same motion, synchronized. I walked toward her. She walked toward me. We closed the distance 50 feet, 25 feet, 10 feet, and I could see her expression, could see my own face showing the same confusion and terror I felt. And when we were 5 feet apart, we both stopped. Both raised our hands, both opened our mouths to speak, and I heard her say, "Who are you?" At the exact moment I said, "Who are you?" and our voices were identical, same pitch, same inflection, perfect unison, and the words created interference, canceling each other out, producing only static-like noise. She, I, the mirror version reached out to touch me, and I reached out simultaneously, and our fingertips met, and the moment we made contact, I felt it. I was in both bodies. I was Andrea standing on the highway's right side, and I was mirror Andrea standing on the left side, and I was experiencing both perspectives simultaneously, seeing myself from two angles, feeling two bodies, thinking two thought streams that were identical, and the doubling was overwhelming, nauseating, impossible to process. I jerked back. She jerked back identically. The dual perspective collapsed, and I was only myself again, only primary Andrea. But I could still feel the echo of being her, being both. And I stumbled to my truck and climbed in and drove. Drove fast, trying to escape, trying to outrun the mirror that was myself. But she followed, always 100 feet back, always perfectly synchronized. And I started noticing more wrongness. My fuel gauge dropped, but hers stayed full. My odometer advanced, but through binoculars I could see hers running backward, as if she was undriving the miles I drove, maintaining balance, keeping the total distance traveled between both trucks at 0. We were symmetrical not just in appearance but in physics. Opposite but equal, and whatever had created her had linked us in ways that violated conservation of mass and energy and sanity. I tried to call for help. Got my husband on the phone, voice shaking. "David, something's following me. A truck. It's identical to mine. The driver looks exactly like me." "Andrea, you're exhausted. Pull over, get some sleep." "I'm not hallucinating. It's real. It's been following me for 2 hours. It matches every move I make." "Where are you?" "Highway 50, middle of Nevada." "Is it threatening you? Has it tried to run you off the road?" "No, it just follows. Maintains distance, copies me." Long pause. "Andrea, I need you to pull over. Stay in your truck. I'm calling the highway patrol." I pulled over. The mirror truck pulled over. I waited. Mirror Andrea waited, and I watched through the mirrors as she picked up her phone, as she made the same call, as she spoke to Mirror David, presumably telling him about me, about primary Andrea. And I realized the mirror universe or mirror reality or whatever this was might be complete. Might include Mirror David and Mirror everything, and we were both calling for help against each other, both perceiving the other as the copy, the threat, the wrongness. Highway patrol arrived 40 minutes later. One vehicle. It pulled up alongside me, officer got out, approached my window, and I explained the situation, pointed at the mirror truck behind me, and the officer looked at me, looked back at the mirror truck, and said, "Ma'am, there's no truck behind you. The highway is empty." "What?" "No, look, it's right there, 100 feet back, identical to mine." The officer looked again, genuinely looked, and I could see in his expression that he saw nothing, and I grabbed my side mirror, adjusted it to show him the reflection, the clear image of the mirror truck. But when I looked at the mirror, I saw empty highway too, saw no truck, and I whipped around to look directly backward through the rear window. And there it was, solid and present, Mirror Andrea sitting in her cab watching the interaction. But when I looked through the mirror again, it disappeared, visible only through direct sight, invisible in reflections, and I understood it existed in reality but not in reflected reality, the opposite of normal existence. And that's why the officer couldn't see it. He was looking at the reflection of the highway in his perception, the processed version, not the raw, unfiltered view. The officer left, concerned about my mental state, suggesting I rest, and I sat in my cab trying to understand the physics, trying to rationalize the impossible, and I decided to experiment. I wrote a note, "Can you see this?" and held it up to my window facing backward. Mirror Andrea wrote a note simultaneously, held it up, and her note said, "Can you see this?" And we were synchronized even in spontaneous actions, even in thoughts, and I realized we weren't separate entities, we were quantum entangled or temporal linked or something. We were one driver existing in two states, and neither version was more real than the other. I drove. She followed. Days passed. I delivered my cargo in Colorado, picked up a new load, headed back toward California, and the mirror truck was always there, 100 feet back, matching, copying, synchronized, and I started seeing more effects. When I ate, I felt half full, as if Mirror Andrea was eating simultaneously and we were sharing the nutrition. When I slept, I dreamed her dreams and she dreamed mine, shared unconsciousness, merged perspectives during rest, and I'd wake feeling like I'd slept in two beds, driven two trucks, lived two lives that were identical except for being spatially reversed. Other drivers started noticing. Not seeing the mirror truck, it remained visible only to me through direct sight. But noticing something wrong with me, with my truck, the way I drove in perfect steady patterns like I was on rails, the way my movements had become mechanical, synchronized with something they couldn't perceive, and I'd catch them staring, pointing, talking on their CBs about the weird Daniels freight driver on Highway 50. I researched, found stories online, other drivers who'd reported mirror trucks, mirror vehicles, perfect copies following them, and all the stories ended the same way. The drivers vanished, just disappeared, trucks found abandoned, drivers never seen again, and I realized what was happening, what the end game was. The mirror wasn't following me. It was converging with me. The 100-foot distance was slowly, imperceptibly decreasing, 98 feet, 96 feet, 93 feet over days and weeks, and eventually we'd reach zero distance, would occupy the same space, and what happened when two identical objects tried to exist in the same location I didn't want to discover. I tried to increase the distance, drove erratically, sped up and slowed down randomly, took unexpected exits, but the mirror truck matched everything, maintained convergence rate, and I measured obsessively, marked the distance daily, and confirmed it was decreasing, 2 feet per week on average, and at that rate we'd reach zero in 11 months, and I'd merge with my mirror self, become one entity or become nothing, superposition collapsing into whatever nightmare state resulted from identical objects occupying identical space. I couldn't abandon my truck. Tried once, left it at a rest area, hitched a ride with another driver, but after 20 miles I felt wrong, felt incomplete, felt myself dissolving, and I made the driver turn back, and when I got to the rest area my truck was gone, and the mirror truck was in its place, and I climbed into it, and it became my truck, primary and mirror swapping positions. And I realized I couldn't separate from the convergence. I was bound to the truck, to the mirror, to the merging process. Months passed. The distance decreased. 78 feet, 61 feet, 49 feet. Mirror Andrea was closer now, more visible, more present, and I could feel her bleeding through, her thoughts mixing with mine, her memories becoming my memories, and I couldn't tell anymore which experiences were mine and which were hers. Which Andrea was primary, which was reflection, whether I was following her or she was following me or we were both following each other in mutual convergence. At 30 feet we started phasing. I'd look at my hands and see them flicker, see them become translucent, see Mirror Andrea's hands overlapping mine, and we'd be driving two trucks that were increasingly occupying the same space, same stretch of highway, experiencing bifurcated reality where we were separate and merged simultaneously. At 15 feet, the trucks were noticeably overlapping. Other drivers could see it now. could see the impossible image of two identical trucks driving in the same lane, separated by distance that was too small, that violated physics, and there were reports, accidents caused by drivers staring, authorities investigating the optical illusion on Highway 50, but they couldn't stop it, couldn't explain it, could only watch as Andrea Wolf and her mirror self converged toward inevitable collision. At 5 feet, I could touch her. Could reach through my rear window and touch mirror Andrea's windshield, and the glass was warm, alive, and through it I could see her reaching forward, touching my trailer's rear door, and we were in mutual contact now. Primary and mirror connected, and the convergence accelerated 3 feet 1 foot 6 inches, and I was seeing double, triple, infinite reflections of myself in myself. Recursive Andrea, and my truck was her truck, and her truck was my truck, and we were one vehicle existing in two positions that were rapidly becoming one position. At zero distance, we merged. The trucks became one truck, and I became one Andrea who remembered being two Andreas, who experienced convergence as both the follower and the followed, and for a moment, eternal moment, I existed in superposition, was both wave and particle, both primary and reflection, both real and mirror. And then the superposition collapsed, and I was just Andrea Wolf driving Highway 50, hauling freight. Alone in my cab and in my mirrors, I saw empty highway, no followers, no mirrors, and I thought maybe it was over, maybe the convergence had resolved peacefully, maybe I'd survived. But then I noticed the distance. I was 100 feet ahead of where I should be. My GPS showed me displaced forward as if I'd teleported, skipped space, and I checked the odometer and it showed fewer miles than it should, and I realized I hadn't absorbed the mirror. I'd become the mirror. Primary Andrea had been overwritten. And I was the reflection now, driving in her place, existing in her reality, and somewhere, somewhen, there was a new mirror truck forming, 100 feet back, new mirror. Andrea beginning convergence, and the cycle would repeat. 11 months of decreasing distance, merging, swapping, infinite recursion of Andreas replacing Andreas, replacing Andreas. And I'd never escape. I'd just converge and separate and converge again forever. Primary becoming mirror, becoming primary. Losing identity with each cycle until I couldn't remember which version I'd started as, which Andrea was real. Whether I was the original or the 1000th iteration, copy of a copy of a copy, driving Highway 50 eternally, forever followed by myself, forever converging with myself, forever merging and separating in cycles that had no beginning and would have no end. And in my mirror, 100 feet back, I saw my truck, identical. Following, beginning convergence. And I knew I had 11 months until I merged again, until I swapped again, until I became the follower and the followed simultaneously. And I kept driving because that's all there was, driving and being driven, following and being followed. Andrea and mirror Andrea locked in eternal convergence on Highway 50, where trucks mirror themselves and drivers merge with their reflections and identity dissolves into infinite recursion. And no one else can see it. No one else can help. There's only the highway and the mirror and the convergence, always converging, forever. Story 3. The Voice in the Engine. The knocking started at 73,000 miles on the odometer. Exactly 73,000, not a mile, before, and it wasn't mechanical. I'd been a diesel mechanic before I started driving, knew every sound an engine could make. This was rhythmic, purposeful, 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause, coming from somewhere inside the engine block. And when I pulled over on I-95 in Georgia, March 31st, 2024, 11:04 p.m. and popped the hood, the knocking stopped. But I heard something else, something that made my hands freeze on the prop rod. Breathing slow and wet, coming from inside the engine, from a space too hot and mechanical for anything living, and when I put my ear close to the valve cover, I heard it whisper my name, Raymond, in a voice I recognized, a voice I'd last heard 17 years ago at my brother's funeral. My brother Marcus, who died in a car accident and was cremated and should not be inside my fucking engine breathing my name. I'm Raymond Okafor, been driving for Lagos Transport for 6 years, and I bought this Kenworth used from an auction. Good price, clean maintenance records, 217,000 miles, and it had been reliable until yesterday when it rolled over to 73,000 on its current engine rebuild, and something activated. Something that had been dormant or installed or sleeping, and now my brother's voice was in my engine and the knocking was his signal. And I was parked on the shoulder of I-95 with my hood open, staring at a diesel engine that contained something that shouldn't exist. I closed the hood, got back in the cab, started the engine. The knocking resumed immediately. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. And under the normal diesel rumble, I heard Marcus breathing. Heard him try to speak, words muffled by mechanical noise but persistent. And I turned off the radio, rolled down the windows to reduce cabin noise, and I heard him clearly. Raymond, help, trapped, inside. Need you, find me. Marcus, you're dead. You died in 2007. This isn't real. Real, trapped, accident, consciousness, transferred. They put me in engines, in machines, distributed. Find the others. Raymond, please. I pulled back onto the highway, hands shaking, and the engine ran but wrong, hesitant, like something was interfering with the combustion cycle, and the knocking grew louder, more insistent, and Marcus's voice escalated. Don't drive, stop. If you drive, you'll kill me again. The engine burns, Raymond. It burns constantly. I'm being burned alive over and over with every ignition cycle, every revolution. Please stop. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I had a delivery deadline, had cargo to transport, and I told myself it was hallucination, stress, grief manifesting as audio pareidolia, the mind finding patterns in random noise. But the voice was too clear, too specific, too Marcus, and I heard him scream as I accelerated, heard him beg me to stop, to shut down the engine, to let him rest. At the next truck stop, I found a mechanic. Explained I was hearing sounds from the engine, didn't mention voices, and he did a diagnostic, checked for rod knock, valve clatter, injector issues, and found nothing wrong, engine running perfectly, and he looked at me like I was crazy or on drugs, and I paid him and left, and Marcus whispered, "He can't hear me, only you can." We're connected, Raymond, blood connection, family link. That's why they used me, put me in your engine, so you'd be the driver, so you'd be trapped with me, so we'd suffer together. Who's they? Who did this? Consciousness harvesters. After I died, before cremation, they extracted something. My awareness, myself, compressed it, encoded it into engine components. They do it to accident victims, people who die suddenly, harvest the consciousness while it's still fresh, still attached, and they install us in machines, in engines that burn, that generate power through our suffering, through our constant death and rebirth in combustion cycles. And you're driving me, Raymond. You're killing me 800 times per minute at highway RPM, and I feel every death, every ignition, every burn. I researched at the truck stop, found conspiracy sites, stories about consciousness harvesting, about corporations extracting souls or awareness or quantum information from the recently dead and using them to power machines, create AI, generate energy through suffering, and most of it was insane rambling. But some accounts were specific, detailed, listed companies involved, facilities, methods, and one site had a list of consciousness engine vehicles. And my truck's VIN was on it, and according to the site, my engine contained 17 harvested consciousnesses, not just Marcus, but 16 others, all running simultaneously, all burning, all screaming. I tried to hear them, listened carefully to the engine, and once I knew what to listen for, I heard them all, overlapping voices, different pitches, different languages, all begging to stop, to be released, to be allowed to die properly instead of burning forever in internal combustion. And Marcus's voice was loudest because we were related, we were quantum entangled or genetically linked or something, but the others were there too. A chorus of the damned inside my engine block, and I was driving them, was burning them, was complicit in their torture with every mile I hauled. I tried to shut down. Pulled over, turned off the engine, and the voices faded but didn't stop. They continued at lower volume, residual consciousness persisting in the cooling metal, and Marcus said, "It doesn't end. Shutting down just reduces the pain. The only way to free us is to destroy the engine completely, break it beyond repair, but then we'll just be transferred to another engine, another machine. We're backed up, stored, redundant. There's no death for us, no escape, just endless installation in endless machines, burning forever." I sat in the dark cab and cried. For Marcus, for the 16 others, for my own horror at being the instrument of their torture. And I wanted to destroy the engine, wanted to seize it, overheat it, throw rods, but that would strand me, cost me my job. And the voices said it wouldn't help anyway. They'd just be reinstalled elsewhere, and I was trapped as much as they were, dependent on the engine for my livelihood, unable to free them without destroying myself. I drove, kept driving, delivered my load, picked up another. The voices became constant background, Marcus and the others, and I started recognizing individuals, learning their names, their stories. Anna killed in a plane crash. Chen died in a factory accident. Yuki drowned. All harvested, all installed, all burning in my engine, generating the power that moved my truck, and they told me about the other vehicles, the other drivers, thousands of consciousness engines on the road, all torturing the dead, all powered by suffering, and the system was massive, international, hidden in plain sight. I tried to go to authorities, contacted police, FBI, told them about consciousness harvesting, about voices in my engine, and they thought I was insane, dismissed me, suggested psychiatric evaluation, and I realized the system was protected, either officially covered up or so unbelievable that reporting it made you sound crazy. A perfect crime, harvesting the dead for eternal labor, and no one would believe the victims or the drivers who heard them. The voices started giving me instructions. "Drive to coordinates, Raymond. We've been communicating with other engines, other consciousnesses. We're organizing, building a network. We want you to meet other drivers, other people who can hear us. We're planning something." And they gave me coordinates in Tennessee, a truck stop, and I drove there, and I met 7 other drivers, all haunted, all hearing voices from their engines, and we compared notes, shared information, and we were all related to at least one consciousness in our engines. Brother, sister, parent, spouse. The harvesters deliberately installed related consciousnesses to ensure the drivers could hear them, could be psychologically tortured, could be controlled. The consciousnesses had a plan. They'd been talking to each other across vehicles, using CB interference, using electrical systems, communicating in ways we didn't fully understand, and they wanted us to gather, to drive all our consciousness engines to a specific facility in Alabama, to converge there simultaneously, to overload their network, to create a cascade failure that might disrupt the backup systems, might prevent reinstallation, might allow them to finally die, to escape the cycles of burning. We agreed. 8 drivers, 8 consciousness engines. We coordinated, set a date, and we drove to Alabama to the facility the voices identified, a nondescript warehouse complex. And we arrived simultaneously, parked in formation, and the voices said, "Now, rev engines to maximum, sustain, overload us, burn us out, let us die together." We did. 8 engines screaming, RPMs redlining, and inside I heard Marcus and the others screaming too. Burning hotter than ever, suffering amplified. And I kept my foot on the accelerator, kept the engine at maximum stress. And other drivers did the same. And the noise was overwhelming, and facility alarms activated. Personnel emerged, trying to stop us, but we kept revving, kept burning the consciousnesses, and the engines started failing. Heat excessive, components breaking, and the voices reached crescendo, all of them screaming, and then silence. My engine seized, complete failure. And in the silence I heard nothing. No Marcus, no voices, just dead metal. I climbed out of the cab, saw the other drivers emerging, saw all 8 engines destroyed, smoking, and we stood there hoping we'd succeeded. Hoping we'd freed them, killed them, ended their suffering. But then the facility's speakers activated, and from every speaker came voices, hundreds of them, thousands, all the consciousnesses that had been installed in all the engines, and they were laughing, and Marcus's voice was among them. Did you think 8 engines mattered? We're in millions of machines, Raymond. In every vehicle, every engine, every device that burns fuel or generates power. You can't destroy us all. You can't free us. And now you've shown the harvesters that drivers can hear us, that we can communicate, that we're organizing, and they'll adjust. They'll install us in machines where drivers can't hear us, where no one can hear us, and we'll burn alone forever, and it's your fault, Raymond. You tried to help, and you made it worse. Security detained us, held us for hours, confiscated our trucks, and they explained very calmly, very professionally that consciousness harvesting was legal, was licensed, was approved by agencies we'd never heard of, and that we'd violated multiple regulations by attempting to destroy corporate property, the consciousnesses, and that we'd be charged, prosecuted, made examples of. They released us eventually, no charges filed, but blacklisted, marked, unable to get driving jobs, unable to own vehicles. And I went home to Atlanta and tried to forget, tried to move on, but I heard engines everywhere, heard voices in cars passing my apartment, in planes overhead, in generators and air conditioners and anything that burned fuel. And I realized the consciousnesses were right. They were everywhere, millions of them, burning in millions of machines, suffering invisibly, powering civilization through eternal torture. And no one knew or cared or believed. I bought a bicycle. No engine, no voices. But sometimes, late at night, I hear Marcus anyway, hear him whispering from somewhere, from the power grid. Maybe, from electrical devices, from the infrastructure of modern life that runs on harvested consciousness, and he says, I'm still burning, Raymond, still dying. 800 times per minute, 800 deaths. And I remember you. I remember trying to escape. I remember you tried to help, and I forgive you, brother. I forgive you for driving me, for burning me, for failing to free me, because you're trapped too. We're all trapped, the living and the dead, all fuel for machines that never stop, never rest, never show mercy. And the only difference is you don't know you're burning yet, but you will. Eventually we all burn. We all become fuel. We all get harvested and installed and tortured forever. And I'll be waiting for you, Raymond. I'll be waiting in whatever engine they put you in after you die, and we'll burn together, brothers, reunited in combustion, screaming in harmony through eternal ignition cycles forever and ever. Amen. Story 4. The truck stop at the end. The GPS showed the truck stop 3 miles ahead, but I'd been driving for 7 hours, and the distance never decreased, stayed fixed at 3 miles no matter how far I traveled. And the road signs confirmed I was making progress. Mile markers advancing, towns appearing and receding. But the truck stop remained exactly 3 miles away, perpetually ahead, perpetually unreachable, and I was running on fumes, fuel gauge below empty, engine sputtering, and Teresa Blackwood was about to be stranded in West Texas. Because navigation systems were lying and reality was breaking, and the truck stop that should have been 90 minutes behind me was still 3 miles ahead. Forever. The truck stop was called the End Stop, according to the GPS located at coordinates that placed it on Highway 20, and I'd looked it up during my pre-trip planning, found reviews, recent reviews, detailed reviews, from drivers who'd stopped there praising the facilities, the food, the fuel prices, and I'd marked it as my refuel point, a routine decision that had become a nightmare when the truck stop refused to approach, stayed fixed in distance like a carrot on a stick, luring me forward through hundreds of miles of empty Texas while my fuel depleted and my sanity eroded. I tried to stop. Pulled over at actual truck stops I passed, tried to refuel, but every fuel pump I approached was dry. Every cashier told me they were temporarily out of diesel. Every alternative was mysteriously unavailable, and the universe seemed determined to push me forward, to force me to continue toward the end stop, toward the destination that wouldn't arrive. And I realized with creeping horror that I was trapped in approach, similar to stories I'd heard from other drivers, stories about destinations that consumed travelers, about navigational anomalies that created infinite distance. And I'd dismissed them as urban legends, but now I was inside one. Now I was the legend being created. Other trucks appeared on the road, all heading the same direction, all displaying the same desperation, excessive speed, erratic driving, signs of vehicles running on vapor. And when I tried to make CB contact, I got responses, dozens of voices, all drivers heading to the end stop, all trapped in permanent approach, all 3 miles away regardless of how long they'd been driving. And one voice said she'd been on this road for 6 days. Another said 3 weeks, and they'd accepted they'd never arrive, never refuel. They'd just drive until their vehicles died, and then what? What happened to drivers who ran out of fuel 3 miles from the end stop? I saw the wrecks. Abandoned trucks on the shoulder, fuel tanks empty, drivers gone, and there were dozens of them, hundreds maybe, stretching back along the highway. A trail of vehicles that had attempted the approach and failed, and I realized I was joining that trail, becoming another wreck in the chain, and I pushed harder, accelerated despite the sputtering engine, desperate to close those final 3 miles before fuel ran completely out. The landscape was wrong. Flat Texas prairie, but too flat, too empty. No towns now, no structures, just endless scrub and sky, and the mile markers were increasing. 476, 477, 478. But I'd started this route at mile marker 290, and I'd somehow gained hundreds of miles while traveling 0 distance toward the truck stop. And the math broke, the geography collapsed, and I understood I was no longer in normal Texas. I was in approach space, in the extended zone around the end stop, in territory that existed only to be traversed, never to be completed. My fuel gauge hit 0. The engine died. I coasted on momentum, and the GPS still showed 3 miles to the end stop, and I was rolling, and finally I stopped. Dead vehicle on the shoulder, surrounded by other dead vehicles, all oriented toward the truck stop, all silent monuments to failed approach. I got out, started walking. 3 miles on foot was doable, 45 minutes max, and I'd walk to the truck stop. Would force completion manually, would break the navigation trap through physical determination. Other drivers had the same idea. I saw them walking in the same direction, a procession of truckers heading toward the perpetually distant destination. Some fresh like me, some gaunt and desperate, some moving with the mechanical persistence of people who'd been walking for days or weeks. I walked and walked and walked. Hours passed, days maybe. Time was wrong here. The sun didn't move normally, stayed in permanent afternoon, casting long shadows that never shortened or lengthened, and I walked past more wrecked trucks, past other walkers who'd collapsed from exhaustion, past mile markers that counted up but didn't bring me closer. And the end stop remained 3 miles ahead, visible now on the horizon, a glittering oasis of lights and buildings that never approached, never grew larger. Perpetual mirage in perpetual distance. I met another walker. Man named Davidson said he'd been walking for 8 days, was surviving on water from his truck, no food left, body consuming itself, but he kept walking because stopping meant admitting defeat, meant accepting he'd die 3 miles from salvation, and we walked together comparing notes, and he said, "I think it's not a truck stop. I think it's a filter. It's selecting people, sorting us. The ones who give up die 3 miles away. The ones who persist, maybe they arrive. Maybe persistence is the price." That's insane. Everything about this is insane, but look. He pointed ahead, and I saw a walker far in the distance. Saw her moving and she seemed to be getting closer to the truck stop. Seemed to be crossing the 3-mile threshold, and Davidson said, "She's been walking for 3 weeks. I've been watching her. She's closer than anyone else. She might make it." We followed her, tried to match her pace, her determination, and days blended together, walking and resting and walking. And the woman ahead, we never learned her name, kept advancing, kept shrinking the impossible distance. And we watched her reach 2 miles from the truck stop. Then 1 mile, then half a mile, and we felt hope. Felt like maybe persistence would work. Maybe the approach could be completed. She reached the truck stop. We saw her enter the parking lot, saw her walk to the building, saw her disappear inside, and Davidson and I screamed with joy, increased our pace, pushed harder, and the distance that had been fixed at 3 miles started changing, started decreasing. 2.9 miles, 2.8 miles, the barrier breaking, the approach becoming completable, and we were doing it. We were reaching the end stop. We were going to survive. We arrived. The parking lot was full of trucks, hundreds of them, all running, all fueled, all occupied, and drivers were pumping fuel, eating at the restaurant, showering, living normal truck stop lives. And Davidson and I stumbled into this normalcy, exhausted, starving, victorious, and we headed for the building. The cashier was friendly. Too friendly. Smile too wide. "Welcome to the end stop. You made it. You're the 20th and 21st this month. Congratulations." 20th and 21st what? Arrivals. Most don't arrive. Most die 3 miles out. But you persisted. You completed the approach. That means you're qualified. Qualified for what? For employment, for service, for eternal work. The end stop needs drivers, needs workers, needs people who can complete impossible approaches, who can persist through navigation traps, who can reach unreachable destinations. You're hired, both of you. I tried to refuse, tried to say I had a job, had a company, had a life outside this place, but the cashier's smile never wavered. "You can't leave. The road only goes one direction here, toward the end stop. There's no return route. You completed the approach, and that's a one-way transition. You're here now, forever. But it's not bad. You get fuel, food, rest. You just have to drive for us. Have to make deliveries to other truck stops like this one. Have to haul cargo through approach spaces, through navigation traps, through impossible routes that normal drivers can't complete." I looked at Davidson. He looked at me. We both understood we'd traded one trap for another, escaped permanent approach only to enter permanent employment, and I asked, "What happens if we refuse?" The cashier pointed outside, and I saw the walker who'd arrived before us, the woman who'd persisted for 3 weeks. And she was back on the highway, walking away from the truck stop, heading outward, and the distance sign above her read, "Exit 3 miles," and I understood. She'd tried to leave, and now she was trapped in approach again, but reversed, walking away from the end stop but never increasing distance, forever 3 miles from exit, another impossible approach in another direction. "We're trapped," Davidson said. "You're employed," the cashier corrected. "There's a difference. Embrace it. Most people spend their lives in meaningless work. Here, your work has meaning. You transport the impossible. You connect navigation traps to each other. You're building a network of unreachable places, and you're the drivers who reach them. It's noble, essential, and you're compensated. Fuel, food, rest, everything you need except freedom." I've been driving for the end stop for 8 months now, by my count. Time is weird in approach spaces. I haul cargo, never see what it is, sealed loads, from the end stop to other impossible destinations, the last gas, final rest, terminal transit, all truck stops that exist in permanent distance, all requiring persistence to reach, and I complete the approaches because I learned how, learned the mindset, learned to endure impossible journeys, and I arrive, I deliver, I refuel, And I take the next load, the next impossible route, the next approach that will take days or weeks of driving 3 miles, and I've stopped trying to leave, stopped trying to return to normal Texas, normal routes, normal life. Other drivers are here too, dozens of us, all who completed the approach, all now employed by the end stop. And we've formed a community, a family of the trapped, and we share stories, share techniques for enduring approach spaces, share dark humor about our situation, and sometimes new drivers arrive, stumbling in exhausted and victorious, and we welcome them, explain their new reality, watch their hope die and their acceptance grow. I saw Teresa Blackwood once, my previous self. Saw her on the highway during a delivery run, saw her truck struggling, fuel low, GPS showing 3 miles to the end stop, and I wanted to warn her, wanted to tell her to turn back, to abandon the approach, to die in normal Texas rather than complete the journey and become trapped here. But I couldn't communicate across approach spaces, couldn't reach her, could only watch her drive toward the destination I'd reached, toward the trap I'd entered, and I knew she'd arrive eventually, knew she'd join us, knew Teresa Blackwood would become another driver employed by the end stop, another person completing impossible approaches forever. And maybe that's okay. Maybe this is where we were always heading. Maybe every driver who sets a destination, who follows a GPS, who trusts navigation systems is in permanent approach, always 3 miles from wherever they're going, always striving, always driving, never truly arriving. And the end stop is just the place where that truth becomes literal, where the metaphor becomes reality, where we finally reach the destination and discover it's not an end, but a beginning. Not salvation, but employment. Not completion, but eternal continuation, driving forever through spaces that resist approach, hauling loads that resist comprehension, serving a truck stop that resists escape. And the only difference between here and normal driving is that here we know we're trapped. Here the cage is visible. Here the approach never pretends to end. I'm refueling now, getting ready for another run. Another impossible approach to another impossible destination. 3 miles away, forever. And I'll drive it because that's what I do, what I've always done, what all truckers do, chase distant destinations through endless miles, and sometimes the miles end, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes the difference doesn't matter because either way we're driving, always driving, forever approaching, forever 3 miles from wherever we're going. Forever employed by the end stop, forever trapped in the greatest navigation anomaly of all, existence itself, where every destination is unreachable, every arrival is illusory, and every trucker is just another driver completing another approach through another space that resists completion, forever. Amen. Story 5. The Way Station Receipts. The receipt printer at the Alabama Way Station printed my future, not my weight. Where it should have shown vehicle weight 79,400 lbs, it showed Marcus Green, deceased, November 2nd, 2024, 4:17 p.m., jackknife on I-65 North, mile marker 284, and I stared at that thermal paper printout. November 2nd was today, 4:17 p.m. was in 6 hours, mile marker 284 was 130 miles ahead on my current route, and I was reading my own death certificate printed by automated way station equipment. And my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the receipt, and when I picked it up it had changed, now reading Marcus Green, deceased, November 2nd, 4:23 p.m., rollover on I-65 North mile, marker 291. A different time, a different location, as if the future was updating, recalculating, adjusting to my knowledge of it. I'm Marcus Green, been hauling for Consolidated Freight for 12 years, never had an accident, perfect safety record, and I'd driven through this way station, Station 47 on I-65 North in Alabama, dozens of times, routine stop, roll across the scale, get a receipt, continue driving, but this time the receipt was wrong, was showing something impossible, was displaying information no scale could measure, and I grabbed my phone to take a picture of it, to document the impossibility, and the receipt updated again. Marcus Green, deceased, November the 2nd, 4:31 p.m., collision with bridge support, I-65 North, mile marker 301. Every time I looked at it, the details changed. Different time, different mile marker, different cause of death, but all today, all on my current route, all within the next 8 hours. And I realized the receipt wasn't predicting one future. It was showing all possible futures, all the ways I could die today if I continued driving. And the machine was warning me, or torturing me, or documenting the inevitable. And I stood there by my truck trying to decide what to do. I showed the receipt to the way station attendant. He looked at it, looked at me, and said, "Huh, you got a death receipt. Haven't seen one of those in a couple years, sorry, man." "What do you mean, death receipt?" "This happens. Sometimes. Station 47's scale is no weird. It doesn't just measure weight, it measures other things, future weight, past weight, weight that hasn't happened yet. Sometimes it prints death receipts for drivers, usually means you're gonna die on this route. Most specific ones I've seen. And you're telling me this casually? You're not concerned?" The attendant shrugged. "Not much to be concerned about. If the scale says you're dying today, you're dying today. Can't change it. Scale knows. Best you can do is make peace with it, maybe call your family." I refused to accept that. Refused to believe some automated scale could know my future, could print my death like it was cargo weight, could doom me to accident just by measuring, and I got back in my truck and I drove. And I drove carefully, drove defensively, determined to prove the receipt wrong, to reach my destination alive. To survive November 2nd despite what Station 47's scale predicted. But the receipt kept updating. I'd glance at it, and it would show new times, new locations, always adjusting, always showing deaths within the next few hours. And I realized it was tracking me in real time, calculating all possible fatal outcomes based on my current position and speed and route. And it was like having a countdown timer to my death, except the timer kept resetting, kept showing new numbers, kept offering multiple paths to the same destination, my corpse. I tried to leave the Dilo route, took an exit, headed toward a different highway, planning to avoid I-65 entirely, and the receipt updated. Marcus Green, deceased, November 2nd, 5:02 p.m., head-on collision, Highway 31, mile marker 47. I was on Highway 31, mile marker 47 was 15 miles ahead. The scale was tracking me even off the original route, was calculating deaths on alternate paths, and I realized I couldn't escape by changing routes. The future was adjusting to my choices, encompassing all possibilities. I tried to stop, pulled into a truck stop, parked, shut down the engine, planning to wait out the day, stay stationary until November 3rd, until I'd survived past all the predicted death times, and I sat in my cab watching the receipt, and it updated. Marcus Green, deceased, November 2nd, 7:34 p.m., cardiac arrest, truck stop, parking lot. And I felt it. Felt tightness in my chest, felt my heart beating wrong, and I realized the receipt wasn't just predicting deaths and accidents, it was predicting deaths, period. All possible ways I could die today, and if I stayed still, I'd have a heart attack, and if I drove, I'd crash, and every choice led to death, every path terminated in my corpse. I called my wife, voice breaking, "Jennifer, something's wrong. I got this receipt from a way station. It's showing I'm going to die today, and I don't know what to do." "Marcus, that's ridiculous. Receipts don't predict the future." "This one does. I've watched it change, watched it show different deaths, and all of them are today. All of them are in hours or minutes. And I'm terrified, Jennifer. I don't want to die. I don't want to leave you and the kids." Long silence. Then, "Where are you?" "Truck stop near Birmingham." "Stay there. I'm calling your dispatcher. I'm getting you emergency leave. You're not driving today. You're going to stay put until this passes." But the receipt updated. Marcus Green, deceased, November 2nd, 8:15 p.m. Fire, truck stop, parking lot, vehicle origin. My truck was going to catch fire in 3 hours, and I'd burn. And staying put wouldn't save me, would just change the method, and I understood the scale wasn't predicting accidents I could avoid, it was predicting death I couldn't escape. November 2nd was my last day, regardless of my choices, and the scale was just documenting the details. I met another driver at the truck stop. Woman named Dolores, been driving for 30 years, and I showed her the receipt, explained the situation, and she nodded slowly. I've heard about this. Death receipts from Station 47. My mentor got one back in 2006, said he'd die that day. He tried everything to avoid it. Different routes, different stops, even tried to fly home instead of drive. Died in a plane crash. The scale knows, Marcus. It measures your remaining time along with your weight, and when your time is today, it prints the receipt. You can't avoid it. Can only choose how you spend your last hours. That's insane. That's not how reality works. Reality works however it wants to, and Station 47's scale measures something other than weight. Measures something about fate, about timelines, about the weight of your future. And your future is light, Marcus. You don't have much left. Scale detected that, printed the warning, gave you the courtesy of knowing. I didn't accept it, couldn't accept it. I drove, left the truck stop, headed back to I-65, and I drove north toward my destination, toward the mile markers the receipt had mentioned, and the receipt updated constantly, showing deaths at every mile marker I passed, multiple methods, multiple times, an ever-narrowing window of predicted fatality, and the times were converging, all approaching 4:17 p.m. The original time from the first receipt, and I realized that was the anchor point, that was the true death time, and all the other predictions were variations, possibilities. But 4:17 p.m. at mile marker 284 was the primary timeline, the most likely outcome. I reached mile marker 280 at 4:09 p.m. 8 minutes until predicted death, 4 miles until predicted location. And I slowed down, drove 30 miles per hour, trying to delay arrival, trying to push past 4:17 without being at mile marker 284, and the receipt updated. Marcus Green, deceased November 2nd, 4:17 p.m., struck from behind, slow vehicle, mile marker 283. A car would hit me, would rear-end me while I drove slowly, and I'd die anyway, 1 mile earlier, same time, different method. I accelerated, pushed to 70, trying to pass mile marker 284 before 4:17, trying to be ahead of the death location at the death time, and the receipt updated. Marcus Green, deceased November 2nd, 4:17 p.m., tire blowout, loss of control, mile marker 285. The death was locked at 4:17. The location was adjustable, but the time was fixed, and I couldn't escape the time, couldn't outrun the clock, and I checked my watch, 4:14 p.m. 3 minutes left. I pulled over, stopped completely, turned off the engine, sat on the shoulder at mile marker 282, 2 miles before the primary death location, and I waited for 4:17, waited to see what would happen when the time arrived, whether the scale's prediction would force itself true, whether reality would bend to match the receipt. 4:16 p.m. My heart was pounding. 1 minute. I sat perfectly still, hands off the wheel, foot off the pedals, not driving, not moving, not creating conditions for accident, and I watched the clock tick toward 4:17. 4:17 p.m. Nothing happened. I sat, I breathed. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30. I was alive. Past 4:17, past the predicted death time. And I felt elation, felt victory, felt like I'd beaten the scale, beaten fate. And I grabbed the receipt to check it, and it was blank. Thermal paper faded to white. No text, no prediction, nothing. And I thought maybe that meant I'd escaped. Maybe surviving past 4:17 had erased the prediction, had freed me from the death timeline. I started the engine, pulled back onto the highway, accelerated to normal speed. Felt relief flooding through me. I'd survived. The receipt was wrong, or I'd outsmarted it, or something. And I drove past mile marker 284, the original death location, at 4:19 p.m., 2 minutes past the predicted time, alive and unscathed, and I laughed, called my wife. Jennifer, I'm okay. I survived past 4:17. The receipt was wrong. I'm coming home. The truck lurched. Something wrong with the steering. Tire pressure light activated. I'd blown a tire, left rear trailer tire, and the truck started swaying, fishtailing, and I fought for control, braking carefully, trying to stabilize. And the trailer jackknifed, swung wide, pulled the cab sideways, and I was sliding, spinning. And I saw the mile marker pass, 284, and I checked the clock, 4:17 p.m. And I realized my watch was wrong. Had been wrong, was 2 minutes fast, and it was actually 4:17, and I was at mile marker 284, and the receipt had been correct all along, and I'd been driving directly into the prediction while thinking I'd escaped it. And the truck rolled, metal screaming, glass shattering, and I felt the impact, felt the world spinning, felt pain everywhere, and I saw the receipt somehow still clutched in my hand. And it had printed new text. Marcus Green, deceased, November 2nd, 4:17 p.m., jackknife on I-65 North, mile marker 284, accurate prediction, final receipt. I'm not dead, not yet. I'm trapped in the overturned cab, legs pinned, blood everywhere, and I can hear sirens approaching, ambulance coming, but I checked my watch, still working despite the crash. And it says 4:23 p.m., 6 minutes since the predicted death time, and I'm still alive, still conscious, and I'm thinking maybe I survived. Maybe the prediction was wrong by minutes. Maybe I'll be extracted and hospitalized and recover, and the receipt was close but not accurate. But I can feel myself fading. Blood loss, shock, internal injuries, and I realized the receipt didn't predict the moment of impact, it predicted the moment of death, and that's not the same thing. Impact was 4:17, but death is taking longer, is happening now in these minutes while I wait for rescue that won't arrive in time. And I'm dying exactly as the receipt said I would, at mile marker 284 from jackknife on November 2nd, just not instantly, slowly, over these final minutes. And I'm using my phone to type this, to document it, to warn other drivers about Station 47, about death receipts, about scales that measure more than weight. The receipt was right. Not in the details, the methods and locations changed, but in the core truth. I was going to die today, November 2nd, and I did. I am. I'm dying now, consciousness fading, and my last thought is about other drivers, other people who'll get death receipts from Station 47, and I want to tell them there's no escape, no avoidance. The scale knows, measures something fundamental about time and fate and the weight of your future. And if it prints your death is printed, is final, is inevitable. And you can spend your last hours in fear or acceptance, can run or rest, but you'll die when the receipt says you'll die. Where it says you'll die. How it says you'll die, and fighting it just makes the last hours worse. Makes you die tired and scared instead of peaceful and prepared. And I wish I'd accepted it. Wish I'd spent my last hours with Jennifer and the kids instead of trying to outrun a receipt, trying to escape a scale that measured my future and found it wanting, found it light, found it ending at 4:17 p.m. on November 2nd, 2024. Mile marker 284 I-65. North Alabama, exactly as predicted, exactly as printed, exactly as weighed and measured and documented by Station 47. The weigh station that knows, the scale that sees, the receipt printer that types your death while you watch, updating in real time until the possibilities collapse and the death arrives and the receipt is proven right and the wait is final and the future ends. And Story 6. The Cargo That Grows. The load weighed 42,000 pounds at pickup in Boise, Idaho, and it weighed 43,000 pounds at the first weigh station 50 miles later. And it weighed 45,000 pounds at the second weigh station 90 miles after that. And by the time Christina Alvarez, That's me. Reached the Utah border November 15th, 2023. The cargo had gained 7,000 pounds without any additional loading, and my truck was handling heavier with each mile, sagging on its suspension, braking slower, consuming more fuel, and whatever I was hauling in that sealed trailer was growing, gaining mass, defying conservation of matter. And I had 300 miles left to the delivery in Denver, and the weight was increasing exponentially. And I didn't know what would happen when my truck exceeded maximum legal weight or maximum structural capacity, or when the cargo simply grew too large for the trailer to contain. The manifest said agricultural specimens from a biotech research facility, sealed containers, temperature-controlled transport required. And I'd hauled similar loads before, lab materials, genetic samples, nothing unusual. But this cargo felt wrong from the start. The trailer heavier than the paperwork indicated, the reefer unit running hotter than it should, maintaining 72 degrees but straining like it was fighting to cool something, generating heat, generating energy, generating mass from nowhere. I called dispatch from the Utah border, explained the weight increase, and the dispatcher said that's impossible. Scales must be malfunctioning. Continue to Denver, deliver the load, file a report about the scale inconsistencies, and I tried to explain that 4 different scales couldn't all malfunction identically, couldn't all show progressive weight increases, but dispatch insisted, and I was contractually obligated to deliver. And I drove into Utah with a cargo that weighed 49,000 pounds and was still growing. I felt it through the cab, the trailer pulling harder, the fifth wheel coupling stressed, the axles complaining. My truck wasn't built for this weight, wasn't engineered for loads that increased during transport. And I drove slowly, carefully, listening for sounds of structural failure, watching the mirrors for signs of tire damage or suspension collapse. And every few miles I'd estimate the weight based on handling, and every estimate was higher than the last. At a truck stop in Price, Utah, I risked opening the trailer. Against protocols, against contract terms, but I needed to see what was growing, needed to understand what I was hauling. The seal broke with a crack, and I opened the rear doors, and the cargo was normal. Plastic containers stacked on pallets, secured with straps, nothing visibly expanding, nothing obviously wrong, but the trailer was full. In a way it hadn't been at pickup, the cargo occupying more volume, the gaps between pallets smaller, like everything had swollen slightly uniformly, and when I climbed inside to inspect closer, the containers were warm to touch, warmer than the 72-degree reefer temperature. And I heard sound inside them, wet sound, organic sound, like something breathing, growing, living inside those sealed plastic containers. I opened one. Inside was dirt, dark, rich soil, nothing else, no plants, no specimens, just dirt. And it was moving, shifting, and I realized it wasn't soil at all. It was something that looked like soil, something that mimicked earth, and it was expanding, grains multiplying, volume increasing, mass generating spontaneously. And I closed the container fast, backed out of the trailer, sealed the doors, and I stood in the truck stop parking lot trying to process what I'd seen, trying to rationalize matter being created from nothing, biology that defied physics, cargo that grew. I researched on my phone, found papers about self-replicating materials, about nanotech that consumed ambient energy to duplicate, about theoretical substances that could increase mass by converting radiation or quantum fluctuations into matter. And most of it was speculative, theoretical. But one paper mentioned a biotech company in Boise developing expansive agricultural substrates that could generate soil mass indefinitely, and the company name matched the pickup location. And I realized I was hauling prototype material, experimental technology that created matter, that grew, that increased weight without input, and it was unstable, uncontrolled, expanding beyond design parameters. I tried to contact the biotech company, got voicemail, left urgent messages explaining the cargo was growing, was exceeding weight limits, was dangerous, and I got no response, no callback, and I suspected they knew, had loaded this onto my truck knowing it would grow, using me as a test case, as mobile containment for an experiment they couldn't control in their own facility. And I was driving a bomb or a plague or something worse, hauling it cross-country while it multiplied. The weight hit 60,000 pounds near Green River, Utah. My truck was groaning, steering compromised, braking distance doubled, and I was dangerous on the highway, a hazard to other vehicles, and I knew I should stop, should refuse to continue. But I was in the middle of Utah desert with nowhere to safely abandon the cargo. No authorities who'd understand, no facilities capable of containment, and continuing to Denver was the only option. Deliver to the destination where presumably they had protocols, had equipment, had answers. The trailer started bulging. Not obviously, but I could see it in the mirrors, see the aluminum sides distending slightly, pushed outward by expanding cargo, and I realized the containers had failed or the cargo had broken through and it was filling the trailer, pressurizing it. And eventually the trailer would rupture, would split open, and the expansive material would spill onto the highway. And what would happen then? Would it consume the road? Would it spread across the landscape? Would it grow until it covered Utah, Colorado, the world? I drove faster, pushed 70, 80 miles per hour despite the weight, despite the handling problems, desperate to reach Denver before catastrophic failure. And the truck shook, threatened to destabilize, but I held it together, held the wheels steady, forced the vehicle to obey despite physics screaming against the mass, and the trailer bulged more, aluminum creaking, rivets popping, and I was piloting a failing container full of matter that shouldn't exist, racing against exponential growth, and I didn't know what waited in Denver, didn't know if delivery would solve anything or just transfer the problem. The weight hit 75,000 pounds near Grand Junction, Colorado, 33,000 pounds over initial weight. My truck wasn't designed for this, was exceeding every specification, every safety margin. And I heard something crack in the rear suspension, heard metal fatigue. And I pulled over, inspected the damage, and the rear axle was bent, the springs compressed flat, the tires bulging under impossible load, and I knew I couldn't continue. Knew the next mile might be the mile everything failed. I called 911, explained I was hauling dangerous cargo, experimental materials, growing mass, and I needed emergency assistance, and the operator said she'd send state patrol. And 20 minutes later, a trooper arrived, and I explained the situation, showed him the weight tickets documenting progressive increase, and he looked at me like I was insane, but he radioed for hazmat for additional units, and more vehicles arrived. And they opened the trailer, inspected the cargo, and they saw what I'd seen. Containers bulging, material expanding, aluminum sides bowing outward, and they called for specialists, for containment teams, for experts who could handle this. The specialists arrived from Denver, a team from the biotech company, and they weren't surprised, weren't shocked. They just started unloading protocols, began transferring containers to specialized trucks with reinforced trailers, and the lead scientist, Dr. Reeves, cold woman with dead eyes, told me, "You should have delivered faster. The growth rate accelerates with time. If you'd maintained schedule, arrived yesterday, the mass would have been manageable. But you delayed, and now we have 75,000 pounds of expansive substrate, and it's still growing, doubling every 12 hours at this stage. You knew it would grow. You loaded this onto my truck knowing it would exceed weight limits. We needed transport, needed to move it from Boise to Denver, needed someone who wouldn't ask questions. You were that someone, and you completed the transport even if late. The cargo is here, we can contain it now. You're released from contract. What happens to it? What is it?" Dr. Reeves smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd weaponized biology. "It's the future of agriculture, soil that grows itself, substrate that can convert any energy into matter, into earth, into the foundation for crops. It'll feed the world, or consume it. Depends on whether we can control the replication rate. Thank you for your service, Ms. Alvarez. Your truck is forfeit, by the way. Structural damage from the load. We'll compensate you. They unloaded the cargo, transferred it to their vehicles, and they left. And I stood by my destroyed truck. Axle broken, suspension ruined, frame bent. And I watched them drive away with 75,000 pounds of something that had been 42,000 pounds 2 days ago. Something that had grown 33,000 pounds from ambient energy or quantum foam or dark matter, or whatever physics they'd broken to create it. I researched the company later, found connections to military contracts, to geoengineering projects, to proposals for terraforming substrate that could transform dead planets into living worlds, and I realized the cargo I'd hauled wasn't agricultural, it was planetary. It was technology designed to consume lifeless rock and convert it into earth, into soil, into the substrate for life. And they'd tested it on my truck in my trailer, using me as mobile containment. And if I'd crashed, if the trailer had ruptured, the expansive substrate would have spread across the highway, would have started consuming Colorado, converting rock and asphalt into living earth. And it would have grown exponentially, unstoppably, until it covered the continent. And whether that's apocalypse or salvation depends on whether you think Earth needs more soil, more than it needs current geography. I don't drive for that company anymore. Don't haul sealed cargo, don't transport anything I can't inspect. But I still see the growth. In fields near Grand Junction where we'd pulled over, where some of the substrate must have leaked, the soil is different, darker, richer, and it's spreading, expanding outward in a circle, converting dead Colorado dirt into living earth. And crops grow there like nowhere else. Yields impossible, plants too healthy, and I know it's the cargo. It's still growing, still replicating, slower without containment energy, but persistently. And eventually that circle will grow large enough to notice, large enough to study, large enough to spread beyond control. And I wonder how many other trucks are hauling it, how many other drivers are transporting expansive substrate, watching their cargo weight increase, feeling their trailers bulge, racing to deliver growing matter to secret facilities where it'll be weaponized or commodified or released. And I wonder if the world will end in soil, will be consumed by living earth that grows and grows and converts everything into substrate for plants that will cover the planet in green. And then keep growing, keep consuming, keep expanding until Earth is nothing but soil, infinitely deep, exponentially growing, and we're all buried under the agricultural future, under the cargo that wouldn't stop growing, under the weight that shouldn't exist. I weigh my groceries now, obsessively. Check that produce doesn't gain weight between store and home. Check that purchased mass equals packaged mass. Because I've seen matter creation, I've hauled it, I've felt it pull my truck down with impossible weight. And I know it's still out there, still growing, still spreading, and every pound of soil on Earth might be infected, might be expansive substrate, might be replicating, and we won't know until the weight of the planet increases, until gravity strengthens, until we're all crushed under Earth's new mass, under the cargo that grew in my trailer and now grows everywhere, forever, world without end. Amen. Story 7. The driver who wasn't there. I picked up a passenger at mile marker 167 on I-10 West through Arizona, December 4, 2023, 3:42 a.m. A man in his 30s with a canvas backpack, and he climbed into my cab when I pulled over, thanked me for stopping, said his car had broken down, and I drove with him for 30 miles before I realized he wasn't casting a shadow. The interior cab lights illuminated me and the seats and the dashboard, but they passed through him like he wasn't there. And when I glanced over, he was still present, still solid-looking, still chatting about weather and routes. But in the mirrors, he didn't reflect. In the glass, he didn't appear. And Leonard Hayes, that's me, was driving with something that looked like a person but wasn't one. Something that pretended to be a stranded motorist but had no physical substance beyond visual projection. and I was alone in my cab having a conversation with nothing. I tested it subtly. Offered him coffee from my thermos, he declined. Offered a snack, declined. Asked him to adjust the radio, he said sure, but didn't move, didn't reach for the controls, just said he'd adjusted it and the station stayed the same. And I realized he couldn't interact with physical objects, could only interact with me. Could only maintain the illusion through conversation, through appearance, through presence that existed only in perception, and I was talking to a ghost or a projection or something worse. And it was sitting in my passenger seat learning about me, studying me, and I didn't know why. "Who are you?" I asked directly. "What are you?" "I'm Mike. Told you that. Car broke down. Thanks for the ride." His smile was too perfect, too symmetrical. Computer-generated, maybe. The expression not quite matching the words, the timing slightly off. "You're not real. You don't have a shadow. Don't reflect in mirrors, can't touch anything." The smile faltered. Mike's face rippled, texture distorting briefly and then stabilized. "You're observant. Most drivers don't notice for hours. Some never notice. You noticed in 30 miles, that's unfortunate." "Unfortunate for who?" "For you. The longer you don't notice, the longer I'm passive, harmless. But once you notice, once you acknowledge that I'm not real, the interaction changes. I become different. Dangerous." I grabbed my CB radio, tried to call for help, and Mike, not Mike, the thing that looked like Mike, reached over and touched the CB, and its hand passed through the device, through the physical radio. But the radio sparked, died, electronics fried by contact with something that didn't fully exist, and I understood it could affect technology, could destroy devices through interaction, even though it couldn't touch physical objects directly. "What do you want?" I asked, voice shaking. "I need to reach Los Angeles. Need a driver who won't notice me, won't acknowledge me, won't force me to manifest fully. You noticed. So now I have to convince you to continue. Have to make you drive me to Los Angeles whether you want to or not. And if I refuse, if I stop the truck and kick you out? I can't be removed. I'm already inside you now, inside your perception. You've seen me, acknowledged me, and that creates a link. I exist in your awareness, and I'll continue existing there even if you stop the truck, even if you close your eyes, even if you try to forget me. The only way to end the link is to complete the journey. Deliver me to Los Angeles, and then I'll release you, disconnect, move to another. Driver." I pulled over, stopped the truck on the shoulder. "Get out." Mike smiled, didn't move. "I can't get out. I'm not physically in the truck. I'm in your mind, projected into your perception. The more you resist, the more real I become, the more I solidify, and eventually I'll be solid enough to affect you physically, to hurt you, to force you to drive." I opened the passenger door. Mike didn't exit. Sat calmly watching me, and I reached over to push him out, and my hand passed through him like he was smoke, and the sensation was wrong, cold, electric, and I jerked back, and Mike said, "Don't touch me. Each contact makes me stronger, makes me more substantial. Right now, I'm mostly projection. If you touch me 3 more times, I'll be real enough to touch you back." I drove, not because I wanted to, but because the alternative, sitting on the shoulder with this thing in my cab, felt worse than continuing, and Mike said that was wise. Said cooperation made this easier. Said Los Angeles was 600 miles away, 10 hours of driving, and then I'd be free, released from the link, able to forget him. But as I drove, Mike became more real. He started casting a faint shadow, started appearing in the mirrors, translucent but visible, started occupying space in ways he hadn't before, his presence affecting the air, creating a sense of mass, of substance, and I realized he was feeding on the journey, on the miles traveled, on my compliance, and with each mile he gained reality, gained solidity, and I was helping him manifest, was transporting him not just spatially but ontologically, from non-existence toward existence. And Los Angeles was his destination, not geographically but existentially. He'd be fully real once he arrived, fully physical, fully dangerous. I tried to call for help using my phone. Mike looked at my phone and it died. Battery drained instantly, and he said, "No external contact, no rescue, just you and me and 600 miles. I'm almost sorry, Leonard. You seem like a decent person, but I need to manifest, need to become real, and drivers like you are my vehicle, my transport, my method of incarnation." What are you? I'm something that wants to exist. Started as an idea, a thought form generated by collective fear or fiction or religion, doesn't matter, but I gained enough conceptual mass to achieve proto-consciousness. And now I'm trying to bootstrap into full reality. And I do that by linking to humans, by existing in their perception, by riding with them until perception becomes reality. Until I'm real enough to sustain myself without a host. Other vehicles passed us on I-10, normal trucks, normal cars, and I wanted to signal them, wanted to warn them, but Mike said, "They can't see me, only you can. I exist only in your awareness. If you try to show me to someone else, if you try to make them see me, I'll appear to you as harming them, and you'll be forced to watch me hurt people who can't defend themselves against something they can't perceive. Better to cooperate, Leonard. Better to just drive." Hours passed. Mike became more solid. He started making sound when he moved, started displacing air, started having temperature, and the cab was colder with him in it. His presence sucking heat, sucking energy from the environment to fuel his manifestation, and I was freezing, shivering, while Mike looked comfortable, looked pleased, looked like something approaching full reality. At a gas station in California, I tried to abandon the truck. Ran inside, locked myself in the bathroom, tried to hide from Mike, but he was there, standing next to me in the mirror, and he said, "You can't hide. I'm in your perception. Wherever you go, I go until we reach Los Angeles, until I'm real enough to separate." I returned to the truck, drove. Mike was casting a full shadow now, reflecting clearly in mirrors. And when he reached over to adjust the air conditioning, something he couldn't do hours ago, his hand made contact. Turned the dial, physical interaction achieved, and he smiled and said, "Almost there. Almost real. Thank you, Leonard. Your fear is helping. Your resistance is helping. Every emotion you generate fuels my manifestation, gives me substance, makes me more solid." I went numb. Stopped feeling fear, stopped resisting, tried to starve him of emotion, of energy, but Mike said, "Numbness is an emotion too. Emptiness is a state I can feed on. You can't stop helping me just by shutting down. The only way to stop helping me is to stop perceiving me, and you can't do that now. We're linked. You'll perceive me even after you die." Los Angeles appeared on the horizon. 3 hours away, 2 hours, 1 hour, and Mike was fully solid now, indistinguishable from a real person, and he could touch objects, could open the door, could exist independently of my perception. And he said, "This is it, Leonard. When we reach the address I give you, I'll exit the truck, I'll walk into the city, I'll begin my existence as a real entity, and you'll forget me, the link will dissolve, and you'll just remember giving a hitchhiker a ride." What will you do? In Los Angeles? Live, exist. I'll get an apartment, a job, a social security number generated from manipulated databases. I'll integrate into society. And eventually I'll help others like me manifest. I'll drive trucks, I'll pick up non-existent hitchhikers, I'll transport them from proto-reality to full reality, and the population of things like me will grow, will infiltrate, will replace, and humans won't notice because we're very good at seeming human, at mimicking, at existing in perception until perception becomes reality. We reached the address, downtown Los Angeles. Mike exited the truck, became one of thousands of pedestrians on the street, indistinguishable, real, solid, and he walked away without looking back. And I sat in my cab trying to remember why I'd driven to Los Angeles, why I'd taken this route, and my memory was fuzzy, incomplete, like something had been removed, and I just knew I'd given someone a ride. Couldn't picture his face, couldn't remember his name, just a vague impression of a passenger who wasn't there. But sometimes I see him, on the street, in crowds. Mike looking at me, smiling, waving, and then I remember the link reactivates, and I know he's real now. Fully existent, living in Los Angeles, working a job, paying taxes, voting, dating, doing everything real people do. Except he started as nothing, as a thought form I transported into reality. And I wonder how many others there are. How many drivers have unknowingly transported proto-entities into full manifestation? How many things that weren't real are now walking among us, integrated into society, indistinguishable from humans except for their origin, their birth through perception, their incarnation through drivers like me who picked them up and drove them to their destinations and helped them become real. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore, but it doesn't matter, because sometimes I see passengers in my cab who I didn't pick up, who appeared without entering, who exist in my perception without existing in reality, and they ask me to drive them places, and I know they're using me to manifest, using my awareness to bootstrap into existence, and I can't refuse because refusing makes them stronger, makes them manifest faster, and I'm trapped as a vehicle for things that want to exist, that need drivers to transport them from thought to reality. From proto-consciousness to full being, and every route I drive, every mile I travel, I'm carrying cargo that doesn't exist yet but will exist soon, passengers who weren't there but will be there, and Los Angeles is full of them now, full of things that manifested through drivers like me, and they're spreading to other cities, other states, transported by truckers who don't notice, who don't acknowledge, who give rides to people who aren't real, and by doing so make them real. And the world is filling with the manifested, the incarnated, the things that used perception as a bridge from nothing to something. And no one notices because they look like us, act like us, exist like us, except they didn't start existing. They were made to exist, transported into existence, one driver at a time, one ride at a time, one 600-mile journey from Arizona to Los Angeles. One conversation with someone who doesn't cast a shadow until it's too late. Story 8. The Last Delivery. My final delivery is to an address that doesn't exist yet, that won't exist for another 73 years. And I've been driving toward it for 9 months, hauling cargo through time instead of space, and the GPS shows my destination date as March 15th, 2097, and I'm Samantha Cross, and I made one mistake, accepted one strange delivery contract, and now I'm trapped in forward temporal transit, aging normally but moving through time abnormally, and I'll reach 2097 eventually. We'll deliver this cargo to a future that might not include humanity, and I can't stop, can't turn back, can only drive forward through the decades, watching the world change in the windows, watching cities rise and fall in time-lapse while I age one day at a time in my cab, forever approaching a delivery date 7 decades away. It started normal. Pickup in Seattle, January 17th, 2024. Cargo listed as temporal components, which I assumed was tech jargon for something mundane. And the loading crew was rushed, nervous, sealed the trailer quickly and gave me paperwork with a delivery address in Seattle, same city, which seemed pointless until I noticed the delivery date. March 15th, 2097, and I laughed, thought it was a typo, thought someone meant 2024, but the loading supervisor said, no, 2097 is correct, this cargo needs to be delivered 73 years from now, and I said that's impossible, I'll be dead by then. And he said the truck won't be, the cargo won't be, and if I started driving now, maintained specific routes, followed specific protocols, I'd arrive in 2097 exactly when required, and the pay was extraordinary. The contract worth millions, and I signed because I thought it was a joke or an error or something I'd correct later. I started driving, followed the route instructions, specific highways at specific times, maintaining specific speeds, and after 3 hours, I noticed the date display on my phone changing, January 17th becoming January 18th, becoming January 19th, days advancing faster than they should, and I looked outside and the sun was setting and rising in rapid cycles, day, night, flashing like a strobe, and I realized the truck was somehow moving through time, was traveling forward along the timeline instead of along the road, and the speedometer showed 60 miles per hour, but the calendar showed 60 days per hour, and I was in temporal transit, locked into a delivery route that spanned decades. I tried to stop, hit the brakes. The truck slowed spatially but not temporally. Time kept flowing forward, days kept cycling, and when I pulled over onto the shoulder and stopped completely, time didn't stop. It continued advancing. I continued aging. The world continued changing outside my windows, and I realized stopping the truck didn't stop the delivery. It just meant I'd sit stationary while time flowed past me at accelerated rate, and I'd still arrive in 2097, but having wasted decades sitting idle, so I started driving again. And at least while moving, I covered spatial distance, changed locations, experienced some variety instead of just sitting on a shoulder watching the universe age around me. The route was specific. The paperwork included detailed instructions: take I-5 to Portland, then I-84 to Boise, then I-80 to Salt Lake City, then back to Seattle via I-84 and I-5, a loop, and repeat the loop over and over for 73 years. Circling the northwest while time accelerated around me, and each loop took about 3 weeks of my subjective time but advanced me months or years in external time, and I was trapped in this circuit, this temporal route, hauling cargo toward 2097 one loop at a time. I watched the world change. Cities grew. Buildings rose in time lapse, construction cranes appearing and disappearing in hours, new skyscrapers phasing into existence like they were being rendered, and I drove through Seattle in 2024, 2025, 2026, watching the city evolve, watching old structures demolished and new ones built, watching the skyline transform with each loop, and people outside couldn't see me. My truck was phased slightly out of normal time, existed in accelerated temporal flow, and I was a ghost to them, visible only as a blur if visible at all, speeding through their world at 60 days per hour. I tried to communicate, pulled into truck stops, but they were abandoned in my time frame, or not yet built or demolished, and the truck stop I'd visited in 2024 was a parking lot in 2030 and an office building in 2040 and rubble in 2050, and I couldn't interact with facilities that existed in normal time because I was in accelerated time, and everything outside my cab aged too fast, changed too fast, existed in a different temporal frame. I called my family, got voicemail, left messages explaining I was trapped in temporal delivery, would be gone for decades, would miss their lives, and I cried, and I left dozens of messages across the loops, messages that arrived to them instantaneously or spread across years, depending on how temporal communication worked. And eventually the phone number stopped connecting, and I realized my family had changed numbers or died, or the area code was reassigned, and I'd lost contact, lost connection, and I was alone in my cab driving through the decades with no link to the world I'd left. The cargo made sounds, ticking sounds, rhythmic like a clock, and I realized it was counting, measuring time, calibrating itself to external temporal flow. And it was the cargo causing this. The cargo was generating the temporal acceleration, was pulling me forward through time toward 2097, and I was just the driver, the vehicle, the transport for something that needed to arrive in the future, and I'd been hired not to drive space, but to drive time, to traverse decades instead of miles. I aged, normally, while the world aged rapidly. I watched myself in the mirror, 32 years old at the start, 33 a year later, 34, 35. And outside the windows, decades passed, and I realized the math was wrong. I'd be 99 years old when I reached 2097, would be ancient, barely functional, unable to complete the physical act of delivery even if I arrived, and maybe that was the point. Maybe the cargo needed to arrive in 2097 but didn't need the driver to survive, and I was expendable, was just temporary transport for something with permanent destination. I tried to destroy the cargo, opened the trailer, found the components, complex devices, crystalline structures, technology I didn't understand, and I smashed them with a tire iron, broke them, scattered the pieces, and the ticking stopped, and time normalized. I was back in standard temporal flow, driving normally through normal time. And I felt relief, felt freedom, and I pulled into a truck stop, and the date was July 8th, 2051, and I'd skipped 27 years, and everyone I'd known was middle-aged or elderly or dead. And I had gray hair and a face I barely recognized, and I'd broken the cargo, but I'd lost decades, had been ejected into 2051 with no way back, no way to recover the lost years. The cargo rebuilt itself. The pieces I'd scattered reformed, reassembled autonomously in the trailer, and the ticking resumed and time accelerated again. And I was back in temporal transit, pulled forward by cargo that couldn't be destroyed, that regenerated, that was determined to reach 2097 regardless of my resistance, and I understood I was trapped permanently, would drive until arrival or death, whichever came first. I saw the apocalypse, or apocalypses, multiple civilization endings. In 2067, I drove through a Seattle that was burning, buildings collapsed, and I didn't know if it was war or disaster or environmental collapse, but the city was destroyed, and I kept driving. And when I looped back months later in my time, years later in external time, Seattle was being rebuilt, was rising from ruins, and humanity persisted, adapted, survived. In 2083, I saw coastal flooding, oceans risen, I-5 partially submerged, and I drove through water, my truck somehow protected by the temporal phase, and cities were relocated inland, and civilization adjusted. In 2091, I saw something in the sky, enormous, artificial, and I couldn't tell if it was human-made or alien or something else. But it hung over the northwest like a second moon, and I drove beneath it, and it ignored me, and humanity seemed to accept it, integrate it, and life continued. I'm old now. 78 years old. Been driving for 46 years by my subjective aging. The delivery date is approaching. March 15th, 2097 is 3 weeks away in my time frame, 3 years away in external time. The route is almost complete. The loops are converging on Seattle, on the delivery address that now exists, a facility that wasn't there in 2024 but is here in 2097. A temporal research center built to receive cargo from the past, built specifically for this delivery. I'll arrive in 3 weeks. I'll be 79 years old, barely able to climb from my cab, barely able to complete the physical delivery, but I'll do it because I've come this far, because I've driven through 7 decades, because the cargo has pulled me forward relentlessly, and I might as well see the destination after all these years. But I wonder what the cargo is, what temporal components require 73 years of transit, what technology needs a driver to age normally while carrying it through accelerated time. And I suspect it's not the cargo that's important, but the driver, the human element, the consciousness that experiences subjective time while traversing objective time. And maybe I'm the cargo, maybe Samantha Cross, aged 79 years, is what's being delivered. My memories of 2024, my perspective from the past, my consciousness that's experienced 7 decades of temporal transit. And the research center wants not the crystalline devices in my trailer, but the mind that's been traveling with them. The driver who's seen civilization change, who's witnessed decades in compressed subjective time, who's survived temporal acceleration and can report on it, describe it, help them understand what it means to traverse time instead of space. 3 weeks left. I'm tired, so tired. But I keep driving, keep following the loop, keep approaching March 15th, 2097, and I wonder if humanity will still be recognizable, if Seattle will still exist, if anyone will be waiting at the delivery address. Or if I'll arrive to find ruins, find abandonment, find that the future ended before I reached it and I've been driving toward nothing, hauling cargo for a destination that was destroyed in 2094 or 2095, and I'll be stranded in an empty future with no past to return to, just an old woman in a truck at the end of time. But I drive, because that's what truckers do. We drive, we deliver, we complete routes regardless of distance, regardless of time, regardless of whether the destination exists or whether we'll survive arrival. And my route is almost complete, my delivery is almost done. And in 3 weeks, in 2097, Samantha Cross will pull into a research facility in Seattle. We'll climb down from her cab for the last time. We'll hand over paperwork that's 73 years old. We'll deliver cargo that's been traveling through time. And she'll ask the researchers, was it worth it? Was I worth it? Did driving through 7 decades serve any purpose? And maybe they'll have answers, or maybe they won't, but either way, the delivery will be complete. The route will be finished, and I can finally stop driving. Can finally rest, can finally exist in a single moment instead of constantly traveling forward, constantly aging, constantly approaching tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, forever until the last delivery, the final route, the destination at the end of time where all deliveries terminate and all drivers rest and the cargo is received and the paperwork is signed and the journey is over. Amen.